Hi, welcome to the High Ability Spring Learning Series. And with us today, we have Dr. Ann Shoplick. She works at the University of Iowa Acceleration Institute and Research at the Bell and Blank Center. And she is the administrator there. Dr. Shoplick has done a lot of work with acceleration. She co-authored the Iowa Acceleration Scales. She co-edited A Nation Empowered, for those of you who have read it. And she has done a lot of work with being able to develop these tools, develop better ways to determine acceleration for students. And so she is an expert in the field, and we are so excited to have her. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Ann Shoplick.
Well, thanks so much. It's really great to be here. And I'm excited to talk to this group. And I'm really glad that you're recording this session just so that other people who can't be here right now can watch it later. So I am going to share screen and keep my fingers crossed that I hit the right buttons. So hopefully everybody can see that okay. Cheyenne, yep, you're nodding. We're good. Okay, awesome. So I am going to focus today on the integrated acceleration system, which is a relatively new tool that we developed at the Bell and Blank Center to help people think about acceleration, especially grade skipping for students. And I am Ann Lipkowski-Shoplick, and I am a co-author on the Iowa Acceleration Scale, which is the paper and pencil tool that's been around actually since the late 1990s, if we can believe it. And it's on its third edition, and that was updated in 2009. And we decided it was really important to really think about acceleration and making it even more accessible to people and to help be able to kind of guide people through the process of acceleration. So I'll be talking about the tool that we've developed or the platform that we've developed. And I spend pretty much all day focusing on acceleration. I have a couple of different projects that I'm a part of at the Bell and Blank Center. And, the biggest one is the integrated acceleration system. And it's just really exciting to be working on that. And the easiest way to get a hold of me, if you find you have a question about acceleration or about one of the tools or a process that I'm talking about today, you're welcome to just email acceleration@bellandblank.org. And if I don't happen to be in that day, we have a wonderful grad student who can answer a lot of questions and then also can just let you know that, well, Ann will be back on such and such a day, just so you know when to expect to get a response. So let's just make sure we're all talking about the same thing and just kind of think about a definition for acceleration. Acceleration is a progression through an educational program in a shorter period of time or at a younger age than is typical. And most of the time, students are able to move through things a little bit faster than other students their age. But if we have early entrance to kindergarten, they'll do school in the same number of years, but they would be starting at an earlier point in their lives. So when we're thinking about acceleration, we typically break it into two different types or categories. One is grade-based, where a student is skipping a grade, they're entering kindergarten early, they're not with the same age students. They're typically with kids that are a year older than they are, sometimes a couple of years older, because sometimes we do have students who double accelerate or triple accelerate. And we do have students who enter kindergarten, or excuse me, enter college early as well. So they might start at the usual time for kindergarten and then not finish high school. They might collapse the time period of high school into a shorter period of time and then go on to college at a little bit younger age. And then we also have content-based acceleration, also called subject acceleration. We're not focusing on that today, but if you have questions, you've got my email, so you can send questions. And then we have lots of resources on our website, the Acceleration Institute, and I'll give you that link in just a couple of minutes. I would say when we're talking about grade acceleration, the first thing people seem to zero in on is on the social and emotional aspects. And we'll certainly be talking about that, throughout this talk or throughout this hour that we have together. So first, let's think about why we're even having this conversation. And really, the reason we accelerate or we talk about acceleration as a potential for a student, we want to find a better match between the student's abilities and the curriculum. We want kids to be able to move ahead, to be challenged, to be engaged by school, all of these kinds of things. And acceleration is actually a fairly simple and direct solution to the problem of a student who's not challenged. We also have a lot of research over the past, 60 or 70 years that tells us that acceleration is actually a really good idea and something that is research supported for our students. Yet we are afraid of it. So the Bell and Blank Center has worked very, very hard over the last, 30 years to try to kind of spread the good news about acceleration and let people know that we actually, we know a lot about it and it's something that we can approach with confidence. So, we're really interested in making sure people know about it. So in terms of the research, we have short-term benefits. So the whole idea that we want our students to be more challenged and engaged in school. We want them to learn good habits of mind, like doing their homework, studying for a test, having to think about things that they're preparing for school, right? We want them to learn how to work hard. We don't want school to teach our students to be lazy or to assume that they know everything and they don't have to study, this kind of thing. We want to teach our students good habits of mind. And then we do have research that tells us that these early entrants to kindergarten or to college do very well when they're compared directly to their older classmates. We find the students don't burn out on the subjects that they're accelerating in. They stay engaged. There's been a lot of research on students who accelerate in math and science. And we have found really positive results for that. They do stay engaged, all the way up through what do they major in college and what are their careers focused on. And very often there's a strong link between what we saw in elementary and middle school and what they're doing in their careers. And then to reassure people about the social piece, as we accelerate students, as we move them ahead, we're actually putting them in a situation where they're with other kids that are more like themselves. They're on the same intellectual wavelength. And a lot of times the kinds of games and toys and things that they like to do are similar to those of older students. We see a lot where a young, bright student is often playing just very naturally with older kids, right? They seek out the older kids in their neighborhood, for example. And so it's an easier transition to acceleration because they're used to being with older students. So we do see in terms of short-term research results, it's a positive picture. Then in terms of long-term, we have studies that are with, following kids that as they grow up into adults. Some of the studies are 10 years long. One of the studies that's in the middle on the bottom row here is a 35-year study where the researchers followed these kids right into their careers. Some people are even retiring at this point. And we found that the accelerated students continue to do well. Their social development is very good. It's about the same as or a little bit stronger than the older kids that they're spending time with, that they're being accelerated, into that higher grade. And when we ask the kids, looking back, like let's imagine, well, there's a specific research study I can cite where we're talking to college students who are 2 years younger than the typical college student. They're typically sophomores and juniors that we were talking to in this particular study. And they had accelerated by at least 2 years somewhere in their kindergarten through 12th grade years. So they were a couple of years younger than the other college students. And they looked back, especially at their high school time, and said things like, well, there were some temporary inconveniences. For example, I couldn't drive when all my friends could drive. I wasn't allowed to date, these kinds of things. But again, they saw those as temporary inconveniences And as time went on, they said it was worth it. I'm glad I've accelerated. I'm really happy with what I've been able to do. And a lot of the students even talk about how acceleration has given them the gift of time, and it has allowed them to do other things that they might not have chosen to do, maybe a double major, maybe going on to graduate school, maybe a gap year, different kinds of experiences that they might be able to have because they saved that time somewhere between K and 12. So as we feel good, right? Acceleration seems to be a positive thing. We can feel some confidence as we're going into making these decisions. We have research to support us as we're thinking about a student or a group of students, and okay, how are we going to figure out who's ready to accelerate, and how can we help them through the transition to acceleration? So we always want to focus on objective information. And we want to think about a team approach to acceleration, that one person isn't going to be a gatekeeper. We want to include the current teacher who has spent a lot of time with the student and has had an opportunity to get to know that student. We also want to include, of course, the family, right? The parents, the guardian, somebody who knows that child well. And other people, maybe there's a coach or a specific teacher or a counselor that knows that student well, and they can contribute to the decision as well. We want to bring this team together and get their different opinions and get information from these different aspects of the student's development. We want to think a lot about communication, especially as we're gathering the information. We want to encourage people to talk to each other as we're going through the process. But then as the student is making that transition to acceleration, we want to keep those lines of communication open and encourage the family to let the school know, how it's going. And maybe the student's coming home with some issues from school. So we want to share that with the new teacher to help the student to make an easier transition. Um, Another thing I didn't mention, the trial period. When we make a decision to grade skip a student, it's really helpful to set it up so that we have a time period of around 6 to 8 weeks where we are making this transition. We're trying it out. We're seeing how the student's performing and what kinds of extra supports the student might need, right? So we're labeling it a trial period, and everybody can feel good that, okay, we're going to try this. Maybe if we see something that a student is struggling with after a couple of weeks, well, we're going to insert some additional support for that student. And the student can know that this doesn't have to be a permanent decision. We're trying it out, right? So that's all important to share with the student and with the family as we're kind of thinking through this. Then we also want to think about, how do we know that it's working? How do we measure success? We want our students who accelerate to continue to be good students, right? To continue to do well. And by being a good student or doing well, I mean really getting A's and B's. We don't want to accelerate a student into a situation where they're overwhelmed and it's just too hard for them, right? We want it to be the right level. We want it to be more challenging than the current level, but we don't want it to be too challenging. Okay, so we want to be data driven in terms of making this decision, and we want objective information. We want to get it from different people, and several pieces of information that are really important come from the testing. Achievement testing has to do with how the student is doing compared to their regular grade, right? Like right now, this year, how does the student perform? And typically when we're looking at accelerated students or students who are good candidates for acceleration, we're looking at the kids in the top 5 or 10% usually, right? So about the 90th or 95th percentile. And if we're looking, and I'm not going to use this as a cutoff that we're not even going to look at a student if they're not already at the 95th percentile. No, but it's one of the pieces of information. And we do want to see that the students have performed very well compared to their current age group. On the right-hand side of the arrows is the ability testing. And that's IQ testing, essentially. And that's a good measure, a good predictor overall of how students will succeed in school. So we want that information as well. And then in the middle is aptitude testing. And it's in the middle because it is in the middle of achievement and ability testing. Aptitude has to do with a student's readiness to learn about a specific subject. So we talk about math aptitude or verbal aptitude typically. And all three of these types of testing are important and helpful as we're thinking about acceleration for a given student. When we're trying to measure aptitude, we often use above level testing. And that means that we're giving a test that was developed for older students to younger students. You might be familiar with the idea of students who are in 7th or 8th grade taking the ACT or the SAT, the college level exams, right? The college entrance exams. That's an example of above level testing. So we're using a test that was designed for older kids. We give it to the younger kids, and that raises the ceiling. It gives them something harder to work on. And it helps us to see, well, what is that student's aptitude really like? And we might find out they get, a pretty average score on that test, or maybe even a very poor score. And it doesn't mean that they're not talented if they get a poor score. It just means that probably grade level or, enrichment level information is appropriate for the student. But if we're getting a student who's taking an above level test and doing really, really well on it, it's telling us that they're ready to learn a lot more than what's in that current grade level. And that's really, really helpful. It helps us to do what we're trying to do, which is to tailor educational opportunities to the student. All right, so I mentioned the Iowa Acceleration Scale that comes out of the Mellon Blank Center at the University of Iowa. And we have a publisher, Gifted Unlimited, and they do they print it and sell it. And the last time that was updated was in 2009. It's still a solid tool, fine to use it. It's just that it's getting outdated, especially the sections about the tests, because there are some new tests and there's some more information that we've learned since the last time that we updated it. So today I'm focusing on the Integrated Acceleration System, which is our new online platform that we developed at the Mellon Blank Center. And, we launched it in the spring of 2021. So it's going to be 3 years old pretty soon. And it's to really kind of take people by the hand and help you through the process of making decisions about acceleration. So the whole system is online, and it's we think very easy for the facilitator to kind of coordinate all of the data collection and the work with the integrated acceleration system. So the facilitator is the person who is in charge, and that individual is typically an educator at the school. It might be a principal, perhaps the tag coordinator, perhaps a gifted teacher is going to kind of take charge of the system. And then that person has an account and they send emails to different individuals. They'll send an email to the parents, and there's a section the parents are asked to fill out. There's a section the current classroom teacher is asked to fill out. And there's a section where we ask the student questions. And we don't ask the student to, type their answers into the computer. Typically, the regular classroom teacher who's currently working with the student is the one that'll interview the student. But maybe, the gifted coordinator could do that as well, or there might be other individuals that could do that part. So all these different people are feeding information into the online system. Also in the middle there under access, the Mellon Blank Center is well known for our work with twice exceptional students. That's not my area of expertise, but I've got colleagues on speed dial that we can ask for help if there's a student who is twice exceptional who might be considered for acceleration. And it does happen. It happens pretty often. And there may be specific questions about the testing that the student has already gone through, or maybe we need some additional testing, whatever. The Bell and Blank Center experts can be helpful with some of those questions. And then I mentioned the student interview. And then what's really unique about this system, this process, is once you put all the data into the system, then you have the opportunity to discuss what you've done in your team meeting, and you can produce a report. And that report includes a recommendation about acceleration for this particular student. And it also includes all of the data that you collected. So it's a really nice kind of package, I guess, where you have all the information that you collected and you've got a good document about this process of discussing acceleration for a given student. So there are lots of questions on the integrated acceleration system for the different people to fill out. Things about the student's performance in school, their friendships, their motivation about school, physical development, their attitude about acceleration, what kind of a communication system do we have, between families and schools, and then their aptitude, ability, and achievement test results as well. I mentioned the team approach. So we've set it up so that 4 people are required, and that includes the facilitator, this person who's in charge of the process and the person who has an account and types in the information. Then also the parent or guardian, the current classroom teacher, and then a 4th person is the future classroom teacher. And the reason we include them is we want somebody on the team who knows where things are going. They know what the new curriculum is for that grade that the student would be moving up into. And they'll be really helpful, especially in terms of the transition and thinking about what are the students' potential gaps. And what do I need to make sure this student knows before they move into my new classroom? What are the kinds of things that our kids are prepared to do when they move into the new classroom? So those are the 4 required people, and then additional members can certainly be on the team. Some schools need to include the principal, for example, or another administrator. Great. Sometimes they are the facilitator. Sometimes they're a member of the team. And then there are other individuals who are certainly welcome to participate. I want to mention just a couple of special considerations that are kind of, I don't know, I don't want to use the term showstoppers, but things that would really, give us pause when we're thinking about the potential of acceleration for a given student. We're really concerned if we're talking about a student who might be moving into the same grade as a sibling. So, maybe we're talking about a girl, and she's going to be moving up into her brother's class. We wouldn't recommend that. And the reason for that is not because we have research on it. I will tell you, we don't, because it's not something we recommend. We don't recommend moving into the same grade as an older sibling because of the family dynamics concerns. We just don't have data to tell us how that student might do. We'd like to think they'd be very successful academically, but we're very concerned about the impact on the family. How's that older sibling going to feel? You're moving a student into that older sibling's territory, and there's a lot of concern about that. How will that affect them long term? Not just this year, but long term. And then also, if we're talking about twins, and we're separating the twins so that one twin stays in 3rd grade and the other twin moves up to 4th grade, we don't recommend that either. We want to look for other alternatives for the student to challenge them, again, because of family dynamics. The second one, the student doesn't want to be accelerated. So we always want to think about the age of the student when we're talking about this. If you're asking a kindergartner, do you want to accelerate? They don't have enough life experience to really know what you're talking about, right? So if they say no, you're going to, kind of take that with a grain of salt and maybe do a better job of explaining what you're what you're thinking about for that student. Versus if you're talking to a high school student and you're asking them to move from 9th grade into 10th grade and, moving up for all their classes. and they say that they don't want to be accelerated, right? So definitely you want to think about the age level of the student while you're doing this. But if they're really adamant that they don't want to be accelerated, the acceleration is not going to work, right? The student really has to want it. They might be nervous about it. They might need some extra support, but we don't want to kind of force a student to do it. And then finally, aspects of cognitive ability are average or below. And just to give you a number, average IQ is around 100, right? And that there's typically a range of about 15 points. We don't the first standard deviation for IQ testing is usually 15 points. So we're suggesting that a student needs to have an IQ at least a full standard deviation above average. And we have found, the research has shown that students with the higher IQs tend to do better with the acceleration. So this is just one piece of that, where we're trying to help with the guidance and kind of give you a starting point for working with students and deciding which ones would be considered for potential acceleration. All right, so let me just show you what the integrated acceleration system looks like. And this is the home page for a given student. So Snickerdoodles is the kiddo. And we have all these different modules. And the way it works, the getting ready section, you read through all that information and then you check a box. And then the next section opens up, B, build your team. And then you need to enter the information about your team members, and you need to ask the parents for permission. They fill out a permission form for their child to be allowed to be, considered and to use this system for the consideration of acceleration. So those two sections are necessary. And then the rest of the information or the rest of the modules open up. You don't have to go from A to B to C to D to E to F. You don't have to go straight down. Once A, B, and C are finished, then the other ones will open up. Down at the bottom, I think I can click that. There it is, red arrow. There's a section about transition planning and a section about a toolkit. And those open up almost immediately after you finish the getting ready section. And you can see those because those are resources for you to use at any point during the process. Let me see. So C, demographics and related student information. That's the section we ask the parents to fill out. And there's a way for the facilitator to just send an email to the parent and the parent can fill it out. But if the parent doesn't have access to computers or, for whatever reason, they're not going to be filling it out, someone else can ask them the questions and the facilitator can fill it in, right? They can provide the answers. School information, letter D, is the information that's provided by the regular classroom teacher or the current classroom teacher. Student answers are the student answers. Current grade level performance is the achievement testing. General school ability or IQ testing results, that's the cognitive ability testing. And then H is the aptitude, indicators of performance in the next grade. So, step by step, we have all this information that we have you collect. People have asked us, how long does it take to do this? If you had all the information and you just sat down and entered it, I think you'd be done in an hour, maybe 2 hours at the most. But typically you're going through a process of collecting the information. And we see for some students, it might take a week to get all the information together. For others, depending on what else is going on, or if the student has already been tested, it might take more like 2 weeks to gather the information and get everything fed into the system before we schedule our meeting with the whole team. So in this toolkit, we have a number of different documents that are for your support to provide information. So we know that sometimes administrators are hesitant to support acceleration in a school or school district. So we have a document that was that we've written specifically for principals to kind of introduce the idea of acceleration and to give them some background about the integrated acceleration system. We've done the same thing for educators and for parents. We want to make sure people have the basic information and they're comfortable with the idea about acceleration before they dive in. The special considerations were those three areas that I was talking about, the IQ that's at least one standard deviation above average, and the sibling issue, and the student not wanting to accelerate. So that's discussed in the special considerations document. We have a whole document about twice exceptional students and acceleration, and just, some suggestions and things to think about if you're considering a twice exceptional student for acceleration. Tips for the facilitator, how to interview the student, what's in the draft report. And I should explain that. So you're entering all of this information, and everybody's like dying to see what the final answer is, right? So we've set it up so that you can produce a draft, and that's available immediately for the facilitator to review. And what we have found is that people produce the draft report, and there might be some questions that they don't really know the answer to, and they weren't able to get the answer, so they just went ahead and kind of guessed. So they're able to put all that information together, and they can send the draft report to all of the team members for people to review. And then people are able to read through all of the answers to the questions. And if they disagree with something, or if they have more information, they can come to the meeting and talk about it and change answers, so that then during the actual meeting, they're able to produce the final report. The draft report does have a recommendation in it that tells you, what the system is saying about that student, and about their readiness for acceleration. And that can certainly change. If you have your meeting and you change some of the answers, the recommendation might possibly change. We've got a document that talks about the meeting and the report and just gives you some more background, and helps you to write the emails to schedule the meeting and all of that kind of thing. And then finally, there's a transition to acceleration document, and how to discuss the transition with the student. So, and we're continuing to add to this toolkit. So there'll be more information over time that we'll keep providing to people to support you as you go through this process. So here's just a little bit more about acceleration and twice exceptional students. And I just thought of this, but I should have said, it's fine with me if people want to like take a picture of a specific slide or whatever. This is one that you might want to take a picture of, because there are a couple of links there. So twice exceptionality, as I mentioned, is something that we've been studying at the Bell and Blank Center, and we have some experts in twice exceptionality there at the center. And there's a whole packet of information for professionals about working with twice exceptional students that's on our website. And I just gave you a tiny url.com. It's PIP2E. It stands for Packet of Information for Professionals. So that document might be useful for you. And then at the very bottom, we have a whole blog about acceleration with twice exceptional students. And that's another tiny url.com link. So there's, good information out there. So let's talk a little bit more about the team meeting, where we all come together and we talk about the student. So I mentioned the draft report. So we give people the chance to hopefully look at the draft report before the meeting, so they can come prepared with questions or comments or changes to questions, whatever. And then maybe we have an issue that we all want to talk about. The student's been expressing some hesitation about acceleration. Well, what does that look like? Parents, please tell us what you heard at home. Current teacher, please share with us what kinds of things you're hearing from the student. And it might be as simple as the student just hasn't had the opportunity to meet the new teacher, and they'd really like to do that before they're accelerated. That's an easy fix, right? Other things, we want to work as a team, so we come to consensus about updating or changing any of the answers or the information. And then during this meeting, we're able to produce and review a final report and recommendation. And I want to emphasize, we've worked really hard on this and, we tried to think of everything so that all of the important information is included in the system, and it weighs all the factors, and it's going to give you good information. But the student, the school, the situation. So you human beings with all of that information will make a better decision than any computer ever could, right? This is going to give you some guidance. It's going to give you a nice platform to gather information and to have the conversation about the important pieces. But again, if the computer is making one recommendation and your team is saying, no, that doesn't make sense to us, do what makes sense to the team, right? So just please know that the computer is not the end all. So you make the decision about if the student will be accelerated or not accelerated. And then during that meeting, the hope is to be able to develop the transition plan or get started on the transition plan. Sometimes people have to come back and have another meeting about the transition plan specifically. So it's a very nice looking report. It's something, it's produced digitally, but it's a PDF document. So you can print it and hand it to somebody or put it in a file if you want to have a paper copy. That's very easy to do. It's all dated and it has the University of Iowa information on it. So it came out of out of this system. And we really just want to emphasize that it's the power of the process. It's not that final answer. It's the process where we're gathering the correct information that we need to make a good informed decision. And we're trusting the participants and empowering the participants to, to provide this information and to share this discussion. And then again, we have this nice documentation, both from the report and then the written plan for transition that we would develop. Let's see, these are some of the questions that, as we're going through this process, how do we resolve gaps in the student's background? These are things we want to be talking about, right? Maybe we just need to do a little bit of extra testing to find out what the student knows and doesn't know. And maybe we just need to spend a little bit of time. It might be one meeting with a teacher or a tutor to go over some specific math concepts so that student is really ready to move on to this new grade. We want to think about how do we prepare the receiving teacher and the new students, right? The older students who are going to be receiving this student into their classroom. Especially with the younger kids, we want to really be thinking through even the physical development stuff, their small motor skills, their large motor skills. What kinds of accommodations might we need to make, especially for handwriting? And then stamina, if we're talking about a very young student, like in kindergarten or a child entering kindergarten early, they might still need a nap. And if we have a full day kindergarten where there is no nap time, there might be something, to really think about with that. And then as we talk with parents and we're preparing them for this whole process and helping them to think about how do I discuss this with my child at home? And what are the kinds of things, what are the conversations that we need to have before this all happens? Let me see. So some pointers to do with transition planning. Oh yeah, the second one, a monitor. We want somebody to kind of be in charge of this transition period and make sure that the parents are giving information to the teacher and, there's some back and forth there. So the monitor might be checking in very often in the initial time when the student is first accelerating, maybe even every day. How's it going? What are you hearing at home? Is the student having a challenge with a particular thing? Oh gosh, the whole lunchroom thing is really, really tough. Okay, well, maybe we need to assign a buddy to the student to help them navigate their way through the lunchroom and to have somebody to sit with during lunchtime. There might be things like that. And just to really emphasize regular communication as we're going through this transition period. So when we developed, we did develop a document that it's a fillable form that you can use on the website, and then you can save it and print it out, or save it digitally, whatever you want to do. As we're thinking about the different aspects of the student's development and readiness for acceleration. So this is all for the transition planning. So thinking about their academic area, social emotional, and then having scheduled observations of the student. And a lot of time in terms of who's doing those observations, it's often that facilitator who facilitated the process. That person might be the tag teacher or the tag coordinator, who's coming into the classroom and doing their observations, or just, kind of running into the student in the hallway and asking them, how's it going? And what can we do to make things better for you, or to make things easier, or whatever. And there are different questions. I'm just noticing in the academic section, the state testing plan. Typically, if we're moving a student from one grade to another, it's pretty clear that they're in that new grade now. They're officially now called a fourth grader, so they should take the fourth grade state tests, for example. Um, and maybe we find that our student is doing very, very well and they need additional enrichment. So we want to have those kinds of conversations over time. Um, and just, keeping notes, all this kind of stuff that we want to make sure that we're gathering the appropriate information, and again, keeping those these lines of communication open. And I'll just show you, this is what the observations section looks like for the developing a transition to acceleration plan. So let me see what else. Oh yeah, and just an idea that you might take these ideas, the week and academic, social, emotional, those areas, and your notes, and turn that into a digital document that you can easily share between the receiving teacher and the individual monitoring the transition plan. Maybe you want to have a document that you're sharing with the family, so it's really easy for people to enter the information, and then you can easily look back and see what's been going on. So, just some ideas, and obviously you're going to figure out what works best for you and your district, but these are some ideas. So like I said before, I do a lot with acceleration every day, all day. And one of the things I do is write a blog on occasion about acceleration, about different aspects of acceleration. I mentioned the Twice Exceptional Students and Acceleration blog. We have another one about above level testing and talking to a student about testing for acceleration. Talking to parents about acceleration, all these different topics are part of our blog. So if you want to sign up for that, you are most welcome to, and you can just go to the tinyurl.com/signup-acceleration to do that. Now, I have an offer you can't refuse. If you're interested in trying out the integrated acceleration system, I will send you a free access code. The magic word is Nebraska. If you just want to tell me that, or my grad student, that you participated in this presentation or video, and you would like to try out the integrated acceleration system, just send us an email. And like I said, mention Nebraska, and we will gladly send you an access code. A lot of people just try it out with fake information, and they kind of fly through it because they just want to see what it's all about. If there's a kid that you're working with and boy, you really want to, put the real data in and really do this, you're welcome to do that as well. If you're doing it with a fake student or, fake data, I ask you to just type in like fake student as the name, or test student or something like that. So it's clear to us that this is just test data. So anyway, I think it's just fun to kind of try it and see what the system looks like. And then I always want to ask myself and ask us the question, what happens if we don't accelerate, right? We want to consider what the research tells us, that acceleration is highly successful for a lot of kids, right? For carefully selected students, but we have to understand the consequences of inaction. And I know it can be scary, especially when we're talking about a full grade skip. That's a big change for a student and a family too, right? It's a big deal. But doing nothing is still a decision. And I would share that phrase with, maybe there's an administrator or another teacher who's really nervous about it. Doing nothing is still a decision. And for whatever reason, if we decide not to accelerate now, we could still consider it in the future. It is for whatever reason, things might not be right for a student to accelerate at this time this year, but maybe we want to consider it for next year or 6 months from now, whatever. So, I've kind of flown through some of the research and giving you some just bare minimum background about the research. If you want to go to the website, this is a Bell and Blank Center website, accelerationinstitute.org. So we're the ones that support it and keep it updated. We have all kinds of research information. There's actually a whole section that's called annotated bibliography, and it has a lot of articles and summaries of articles about acceleration and different topics. So there's a whole section on social emotional, there's a section on early entrance to kindergarten, there's a section on acceleration with twice exceptional students, all these different topics. And you can kind of zero in and read the topics that you are most interested in. Also on the website is a link to our document, A Nation Empowered. That was produced in 2015. So, already it's 9 years old. I can hardly believe it. But it does gather together some important research about acceleration, and it's free. You can download volume 1 or volume 2 or both. Again, they're on the Acceleration Institute website, but if you wanted to go directly to this, it's nationempowered.org. We're just trying to get the word out and let people know all about acceleration. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and we can kind of open this up with the time that we have left. I'm happy to try to answer them and share the good news about acceleration.
We did have a couple of questions in the chat. One of them, could you talk about physical size as a criterion? If the child's family is small in general, is that a reason not to grade skip?
It is not a reason not to grade skip. So there's a really bright woman I know who's tiny, and she skipped at least one grade, maybe two. And she said it didn't matter, right? She's always going to be tiny. There's nothing she can do about it. So she's always going to be short compared to the rest of the kids in her class, whether she's a year younger or the same age. The when it becomes something we want to think about is really when the families especially interested in sports, and we have to think about how is that child going to be able to participate. And we want it to be fair, right? We want it to be age level, not grade level, especially when it's something like football. So that's a conversation to have.
We also had, how do you recommend talking to a student about what to say to their new class and why they're there now?
Yeah, that can be tricky, right? I like being matter of fact, or encouraging the student to be matter of fact, like the whatever, my parents and the teacher decided this is the best place for me. I needed more of a challenge, whatever. Not, I would discourage a student from saying, well, I was smarter than all the other kids in my other class, and so now I'm here, right? We want to help them. I think it's important to practice with them and to be age appropriate with them, right? And I think teachers know how to do this, right? So I encourage you to think about it, specifically with that student and that student situation, and work with them and with the new classroom teacher in thinking about what makes sense.
I did have a question. We have a lot of districts that do not have the capacity to give an above level test or give a cognitive assessment, and the only true test point that they have is achievement. How do you recommend using the system or going about looking at the data when they don't have the ability to give those kinds of tests?
That is extremely challenging, because how else do we get objective information about this student, right? And this is I would call this a high stakes decision. This is a really important decision and we want to make the right decision. So I think we need to invest the money in doing the testing. Pardon me. And a lot of the testing is not that expensive, right? You're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of dollars. The COGAT is available. That's a group test, and that is acceptable as a measure of ability. And then above level testing, students can take the Iowa assessments a couple of years above level. And that also is not very expensive. It runs around $16 or so. So pretty inexpensive.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dr. Shoplik?
I'm curious, is anybody, and you can show me your faces if you want and unmute yourself and ask a question. Is anybody thinking they want to try this? Just with fake data? Or are we feeling shy?
And I'll say I work for an educational service unit, and so I support districts in their development of just their programming for high ability learners. And so I was just thankful for you sharing this information so I can share with my districts that this is something that's available. This is information that's out there. So I plan on just sharing this information, and that way they can take and do with it as they please. But thank you for sharing today.
Sure. Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Thank you.
I've already sent my email.
Okay, good, good. I'll look forward to reading it.
Dr. Shoplik, would it be appropriate to use this also if you're just skipping one subject? Or,
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. You wouldn't have to. It wouldn't hurt. You would get a lot of information, but you wouldn't have to go through all that time and effort for subject acceleration. For subject acceleration, we really recommend two things. One is achievement testing, looking at the student compared to their grade level. And if we're thinking about subject acceleration, let's just use math as an example because it's easy. We'd be looking at a student around the 90th percentile or higher on the math subtests of whatever their achievement testing is. And it could be the state level test. And then we would ask the student to take an above level test. So maybe the MAP, the measures of academic progress, 2 years above, they could be compared to the older kids. They can use the Iowa assessments, Terra Novas, there are all kinds of different standardized instruments that you can use. And really those pieces are the most important pieces of information for making decisions about subject acceleration. We're not as worried about the social piece. I mean, we want to support the student. We want it to be a good experience for them. We want it to be smooth. But, if they're in their regular grade for the majority of time, just moving them up for one subject, it's not as big a deal.
thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I know that I really appreciate all of this information, and everybody watching the recording will appreciate this as well. I expect that you'll probably get several emails about testing out this software. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording. I'll be on for a few minutes. And if you guys have additional questions, feel free to ask or to reach out.